Hello, I am Jaden and this is my Adaptive Focus app. Now, my Adaptive Focus app is a productivity app that helps the user improve their focus and it helps them stay on task. They will input a number of time that they want, and it will play music based on their options they choose, and it will help them stay on task and just focus on what they're trying to do. The key features of my app is that there is a mood linked audio system where essentially you choose one of the three moods and it will give you a song or an audio corresponding to what you choose. The time sessions, like I said, the user will input what time they want, and this timer will run for how long they want. You can view your session history, see all of the sessions you've done in the past. You have the options to delete that history as well. The AI will recommend you what your next task should be based on the past tasks you've used, and there is a dark mode slider as well. So why did I use Flutter? I use Flutter because it allows for flexibility and it's very dynamic between platforms for, let's say, Android and web usage. The UI is easier to make consistent between those different platforms because I'm using Flutter, and it also reduces the development time compared to other app building architectures. I used set state for my management because it is simple and my app is a relatively small app, and everything that the app runs on is locally based. Um, the Flutter widget tree allows me to have a well-performing app with all of the things I have built into it because it has an efficient widget tree building structure, and I don't have to have unnecessary renderings of certain UI elements or rebuilding certain UI elements once they are getting changed, because there's a lot of things that the user is changing when they interact with the app, so it doesn't have to rebuild those things that it's changing, and that allows for app responsiveness and loading times to stay uh, low. So, like I already disclosed, that starting a session is one of the interactions that the user has, and it's one of the most important actions because that interaction gets saved to SQLite database, and that is how the timer is able to be displayed, and that is also how the audio begins to play once the user interaction is linked with the local database. And once that database shows up, they are also able to interact with playback buttons, so the user has more flexibility with their time. For the user interface and experience design, I opted for drop-down menus for the selection of the mood and the task that the user wants to do. Like I said before, once they select one of those moods, it will give them a corresponding audio. The layout is largely simplistic. There's not much to be confused by. I wanted to keep it very streamlined, very easy to understand. Again, this whole thing is about productivity, so having a lot of things going on in the UI will not lend itself well to productivity. And the UI is also conditional, as it will the start session is the only button that shows up when you open the app, but the playback buttons will show up after you start your session. Like I disclosed before, I used SQLite to store the history for different sessions locally on the app, and the recommendation system is also based on that local storage. So the table will save mood, your type of task, your duration, and however long you did that for. That is the easiest way for me as a developer and the users to track what they were doing and understand it. and how the app will spit that back at the user and how the app will interpret it for its different functions. Now, using the CRUD operations, that is how the database um, actually gets its inputs. You use the insert to put that into the data table. I also use query to get the session history and delete to remove the session history. And this is also how the inputs are validated before the sessions are saved to make sure all the data is saved correctly. For the version control, I used the git commands, and they were tracked through the GitHub commit history page to make sure I was keeping track of my development and making sure I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was changing from time to time. I didn't want to reiterate a change that I had already made before or reintroduce a bug by swapping some code out repeatedly, trying to fix something that I already had fixed or create a new issue for myself. And I always made sure that the comments were short, concise, and they were based on exactly what I was doing. Like this one in the example. This one was about updating the README for the known issues because during testing, when I originally created the README, I had put a certain issue there, but I skipped an issue, so I went back and edited the README file and put that rediscovered issue in there. But I also did that for adding new features of the code or swapping out a certain line of code or changing a class or a function within the code. Now, during my development, I used an agile approach when developing. I did iterative development. Incrementally, I would go in and add a feature, test it, go in and add a feature, test that feature. So I repeatedly session by session, add one small feature here, make sure that feature was not interfering with anything else I was instating, and make sure that everything worked just by adding one thing at a time. Because if I were to bulk code and bulk add things, there could be a multitude of different issues that I was introducing to the code system that I didn't know what I was doing. And debugging should take maybe like 15 to 20 minutes. On a long debug, it could take multiple hours if I was bulk adding, bulk committing, and I would be losing track of what I was trying to accomplish by adding that new code. Now, for this documentation, this ensures that outsiders or other developers can run and understand my project. So I included a README that has the features, the technology used, the installation instructions, the prerequisites, things like that. It's just for those who did not build the project with me. They're still able to understand what I was doing and understand how to use the app through the documentation. And this documentation also allows me, myself, to again go in and change it in the future because of my commit history, because of my README, because of the GitHub commits. It allows me to see what I have done, what I can change, what I would like to change, what I would be harder for me to change. It just allows a streamlined understanding for me, a developer, maybe another developer, or a user. And here's the app demo. So this shows the app startup. What you see, you'll see the AI suggestion. I already have a suggestion loaded because of my various testing sessions. You have the mood drop down, which gives you calm, focus, or energy. Those three moods will give you a certain song. You have the task type of studying, coding, and reading, and then you have the integer-based um, duration in minutes that the user can input. Once they start their input, there will be a session started notification, and there will be a timer that shows up as well. And like I said before, there's the dynamic buttons to keep the UI simplistic, not have too much when you don't need it to see it. So when you start that timer, then you could have your pause and stop buttons as well. And then moving on to the history tab, there is all the past sessions I have done, and I can delete it. And then once I delete it, it will ask me for confirmation before I delete it. And then here we have a demo video. So there you see, depending on the mood I'm picking, it's giving me a different song. And those screenshots are in light mode, and this is in the dark mode version of the app. And then we'll move on to the history function. I can go in the history screen, hit delete, and then it will remove that session from history. So throughout testing the app, I actually found um, that it would be easy for me to not only incrementally test features myself by going through and actually opening the app, but because that takes time, the app has to rebuild itself every time. And depending on system limitations, opening the Android Studio and then running the app, per thing you implement into the app, it has to rebuild itself, recompile, redo a whole lot of stuff that takes 2 to 3 minutes at a time. I also found quick to shorten that time frame to test. I could also do test files that will test things for me. So I had a database test, I had the test of the widgets to make sure everything was interacting with each other. And then I had an integration test that will test the UI, the state management, and everything working together in harmony, making sure nothing was taking information from something else that it shouldn't be taking from. And this just ensured that I was able to test the app efficiently and quickly through watching terminal responses and not having to actually rebuild and recompile and reoperate the app every time I wanted to see something that worked. Now, a bug that I encountered that did confuse me for a bit was the malfunction of the dark mode. It was because the theme was not connected to the entire state of the app. It was only stored locally inside my settings screen file that I used to initialize the settings screen, but it wasn't getting put through to the rest of the app state. So it was only being set in the settings screen. Now this is before in my main Dart file. In addition to having to make sure the set state was being pushed throughout the entire app and not just kept locally on that settings screen file, I also had stateless widget instead of stateful widget, and that will cause issues because the stateless widget will not allow the app to change its state essentially. It would not allow any change from a different file within this directory to affect the app in total in itself. But to fix this, I was able to change it from stateless to stateful to again allow that change. But I also moved the theme of the state to a top level widget in my main Dart file, which is here to the left. And I also introduced a global is dark mode variable to a toggle theme, which would allow the dark mode to go across the entire app and not stay local like I have here in my settings screen. As well as me having that toggle to put the dark mode on, it would also allow me to take it off successfully and those changes would still be reflected throughout the entire app, whether it be on light mode or dark mode. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to watch my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed.